stop. The word came from somewhere behind me, calm and low, and it made the hammer slip from my hand. I turned so quickly that my shoulder struck the unfinished doorway. A man stood at the end of the hallway, half hidden beneath the weak yellow light. Black coat. Dark hair. Stillness that felt completely out of place inside a house I had spent 3 weeks trying to make my own. His eyes were fixed on the wall in front of me. Not on me. The wall. "Who are you?" I asked. He didn't answer. He took one slow step forward, then another, his gaze never leaving the section of plaster I had just opened. "My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 27 years old, and until that moment, the biggest mystery in my life had been why anyone would willingly pay more than $600 a month for a studio apartment in Manhattan. I had bought this old townhouse outside the city because it was affordable, quiet, and supposed to be empty. The real estate listing called it a fixer-upper. The previous owner had called it a family property. The paperwork called it uncomplicated. Nothing about it had been uncomplicated. The first week, I found an old brass key behind a loose floorboard. The second, I discovered a bedroom whose door had been painted shut. And that morning, while repairing a cracked section of plaster, I heard something that stopped me cold. The wall sounded hollow. I tapped it again. Hollow. I tapped 3 more times. The sound came back wrong, as if there were empty space behind the plaster. So I started removing it. I expected insulation. Maybe old pipes. Instead, I found a narrow wooden frame hidden behind the wall. And now this stranger was standing in my hallway telling me to stop without explaining why. "You heard me," he said. His voice was controlled, almost quiet. Somehow that made it more unsettling. "Who are you?" I repeated. "Adrian Cole." The name meant nothing to me then. It would later become the name I wished I had never learned. He walked closer, stopping several feet away from the exposed wall. "How long have you been working on this house?" 3 weeks. His jaw tightened. "Have you opened anything else?" No. He looked at the brass key sitting on my workbench. Then he looked at me. "Where did you get that?" "It was behind a floorboard." Silence. For the first time, something changed in his expression. Not fear. Recognition. "You need to leave this house tonight." I almost laughed. "Excuse me?" "Take your things. Stay somewhere else. You don't get to walk into my home and tell me where I can sleep." His eyes finally met mine. They were a cold gray blue, but there was something underneath them that didn't feel cold at all. Something tired. "Claire, you have no idea what you're standing next to." I froze. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped toward the broken wall and stared into the darkness behind it. "Because I've been looking for that room for 15 years. My heart began to pound. 15 years. I looked at the opening again. The house suddenly felt different. The hallway. The silence. The old wooden floors beneath my feet. All of it seemed to be waiting for me to notice something I had missed. Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph. He held it out without a word. I took it. The picture was old, faded around the edges. A young woman stood in front of the same house, smiling at someone outside the frame. Beside her was a teenage boy with the same eyes as Adrian. I looked back at him. "Who is she?" His expression hardened. "My sister." Then he looked at the wall. "And if you found what I think you found, Claire, she may not be the only secret this house has been keeping." "You found it." Adrian said it so quietly that for a second I wondered if I had imagined him. I looked down at the photograph in my hand, then back at the opening in the wall. "Found what?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the workbench and picked up the brass key. He turned it once between his fingers, studying the worn edges as if he had held it before. This house was never supposed to be sold. I felt a strange chill move through me. The listing said it had been vacant for almost 6 years. That is what someone wanted the records to say. He placed the key back on the table. Who? I do not know yet. The answer surprised me. A man who had walked into my house without hesitation suddenly sounded less certain than I expected. I looked at the photograph again. The young woman stood in front of the townhouse with one hand resting against the brick beside the front door. She was smiling, but there was something about her expression that made me uneasy. Not sadness. Not fear. Something more like she knew the picture would matter someday. What was her name? I asked. Adrian's eyes lowered. Emily. He said the name like it belonged to a memory he had carried for too long. Emily Cole. I looked at him. Your sister? He nodded. She disappeared 15 years ago. The hallway seemed to grow quieter. And you think she was here? I know she was here. His certainty made my fingers tighten around the photograph. Then why did you say you have been looking for the room? I asked. Because I never found it. He glanced toward the exposed wall. Not until today. I looked at the opening again. There was only darkness beyond the broken plaster. What happened 15 years ago? Adrian's expression closed immediately. That is not a story you want to hear tonight. You came into my house and told me to leave. I think I deserve more than that. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Somewhere upstairs, an old pipe made a hollow clicking sound. I suddenly noticed how strange the house felt when it was quiet. Like every room had been holding its breath. Adrian finally looked at me. Emily was 22 when she disappeared. She had been asking questions about people she should not have trusted. She told me she had found something important. What? She never told me. Then how do you know it is connected to this house? He looked toward the wall again. Because the last photograph she ever sent me was taken here. My breath caught. When? The night before she disappeared. I lowered the photograph. This one? No, he reached into his coat again and pulled out his phone. After a moment, he showed me an old scanned image. It was darker than the photograph I held, but the house was unmistakable. Emily stood near the same wall I had just opened. There was one difference. In the old picture, a small wooden panel was visible behind her shoulder. The same panel I had uncovered that morning. She knew, I whispered. She knew there was something behind it. Adrian nodded. And now you know too. I looked at the opening. A thin draft moved through the room, carrying the faint smell of old wood and dust. I stepped closer. Adrian said my name, but I barely heard him. Something inside the wall had caught the light. I reached through the opening and pulled out a small metal box. It was covered in dust. My hands trembled as I placed it on the workbench. There was no lock. No label. Just a single word scratched across the lid. Emily. I looked at Adrian. He had gone completely still. Do not open that, he said. And that was the exact moment I knew I was going to. Do not open that. Adrian's voice stopped me, but only for a second. My fingers were already resting on the metal lid. I looked at him across the workbench. His face had changed. The calm certainty I had seen since he walked into the house was gone, replaced by something I could not name. Why? I asked. Because if Emily put her name on that box, she wanted whoever found it to know exactly who it belonged to. That does not answer my question. It is the only answer I can give you right now. I stared at the box. The metal was old, scratched around the edges, but the name was still clear. Emily. One word. 15 years of silence pressed into 6 letters. You have spent 15 years looking for her, I said. And now you are telling me not to look inside? Adrian looked away for a moment. I have spent 15 years looking for the truth. Is there a difference? He looked back at me. Sometimes. I slid my thumb beneath the lid. It lifted with a soft click. Adrian took one step forward. Claire. I stopped. Not because I was afraid of him. Because there was something in his voice I had not heard before. Not authority. Not warning. Fear. I opened the box. Inside was a folded photograph, a small silver key, and a piece of paper covered in handwriting. My breathing slowed as I reached for the photograph first. It showed Emily standing in the same hallway, but this time she was not alone. A little girl stood beside her. The child could not have been more than 10 years old. She had light brown hair and a pale blue sweater. I stared at the picture. Something inside me shifted. The room seemed suddenly farther away. I know her, I whispered. Adrian moved closer. Who? I turned the photograph toward him. The girl. His eyes fixed on the image. Do you? I could not answer. I touched the edge of the photograph with one trembling finger. There was something familiar about the child's face, but the memory stayed just beyond reach. A hallway. Rain against glass. A woman's voice. A hand holding mine. Then nothing. I think I have seen this place before, I said. Adrian went completely still. Claire, you were not supposed to be here 15 years ago. I know. You were never connected to Emily. Then why do I remember her? He did not answer. I unfolded the piece of paper. There were only 3 lines written in dark blue ink. If someone finds this, do not trust the man who brings them here. He will say he wants the truth. He does not. I read it twice. Then a third time. My eyes lifted slowly toward Adrian. He had seen it too. That was not there when I last saw Emily's handwriting, he said. When did you last see her? The day before she disappeared. And she warned you about someone? No, his voice became quieter. She warned me about everyone. A floorboard creaked somewhere upstairs. I froze. Adrian looked toward the ceiling. The sound did not come again. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I noticed something on the photograph. A tiny mark near the edge of the wall. The same mark appeared on the metal box. A circle with 2 short lines beneath it. What is that? I asked. Adrian stared at it. His expression changed again. I have seen that symbol before. Where? He looked at me. On the original file from the night Emily disappeared. My stomach tightened. Then we need to find that file. Adrian shook his head. The file was destroyed years ago. I looked down at the box. Then why did Emily leave us a copy? Adrian's eyes met mine. Neither of us spoke. The answer was waiting somewhere inside that house. And for the first time, I realized the secret was not simply behind the wall. It had been waiting for me. The house was silent, but I could not stop hearing that last sentence in my head. It had been waiting for me. I stood beside the workbench with Emily's photograph in one hand and the handwritten note in the other, while Adrian remained near the doorway, watching me as if he expected the room to change. You said the original file was destroyed, I said. Yes. Then how did you recognize the symbol? Adrian looked toward the photograph again. Because it appeared on the evidence list. What evidence list? He hesitated. The list connected to Emily's disappearance. I folded the note carefully and placed it beside the metal box. You told me you were looking for the truth. Maybe this is where we start. Adrian studied me for several seconds. You should not be involved. That stopped being an option when I found your sister's photograph in my wall. He did not argue. Instead, he walked toward the staircase. There is something upstairs you need to see. I followed him. The wooden steps creaked beneath our feet, each sound seeming louder in the quiet house. We reached the 2nd floor, and Adrian stopped in front of the bedroom whose door had been painted shut. This room? I asked. Yes. He ran his fingers over the old paint around the frame. Emily used to stay here when she visited. My heart skipped. Then why was it sealed? I do not know. He looked at me. That is the problem. There are too many things I do not know. He pushed against the door. It opened with surprising ease. Dust floated through the pale afternoon light. The room was almost empty. An old wooden desk stood beneath the window. A narrow bookshelf leaned against one wall. On the far side, faded wallpaper showed tiny blue flowers. I stepped inside slowly. Something about the room felt familiar. Not frightening. Familiar. I moved toward the desk. There were scratches along its surface, small marks that looked almost deliberate. Adrian stood behind me. Emily used to write here. Letters? Mostly notes. I opened the top drawer. Empty. The second drawer was empty too. Then my fingers touched something beneath the wood. I looked underneath and found a thin envelope taped to the bottom. My pulse quickened. Adrian. He came closer. The envelope had his name written across it. His expression changed before he even touched it. She never gave me that, he whispered. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. He read the first line and stopped. What does it say? I asked. He handed it to me. The handwriting was Emily's. Adrian, if you are reading this, you finally found the house. My eyes moved to the next line. But if you found it because of the girl, then she remembered. I looked up. The girl? Adrian's face had gone pale. Keep reading. I did. She will not remember everything at once. The memory will return when she sees the blue room. I looked around. Blue wallpaper. Blue curtains. Blue flowers. My breath caught. Then a sound came from somewhere inside the wall. 3 soft knocks. Knock. 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 Adrian and I stared at each other. The room went completely still. I stepped toward the wall. Did you hear that? Yes. Another 3 knocks came from behind the wallpaper. My heart began pounding. I placed my palm against the wall. It was cold. Then, without warning, a memory flashed through my mind. A little girl sitting on this floor. Emily kneeling in front of her. Rain against the window. A silver key being pressed into my small hand. And Emily whispering, when the man comes back, hide this. I pulled my hand away. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. Adrian was staring at me. Claire, he said softly. What did you remember? I looked down at my palm, even though the key from my childhood was no longer there. Then I looked at the wall. Someone gave me a key. Adrian's voice dropped to almost a whisper. What did it look like? I swallowed. Exactly like the one we found downstairs. The key was downstairs. I knew that. I had seen it sitting beside the metal box only minutes earlier. Yet the memory had been so clear that I could almost feel its weight in my childhood hand. Adrian stared at me without speaking. What else do you remember? He asked. I closed my eyes. Rain. A window. Emily's voice. The blue room. Then nothing. That is all. Do not force it. His tone was softer now. I opened my eyes. You believe me? I have spent 15 years wishing someone would tell me they remembered her. He looked toward the wall. I believe you. Those 3 words settled somewhere inside me. I walked back downstairs, with Adrian following a few steps behind. The brass key was still on the workbench. I picked it up. It was small, old, and strangely warm from the room. If I held this when I was a child, I said, why did Emily give it to me? Adrian looked at the metal box. There is only one way to find out. He placed the key beside the box. I noticed something I had missed before. A tiny keyhole was hidden beneath the edge of the lid. My fingers tightened around the brass key. I slid it into the lock. It fit perfectly. The click sounded almost impossibly loud. I lifted the lid again. Beneath the photograph and note was a folded piece of blue fabric. I touched it carefully. The material was soft and faded, like something that had been stored away for years. Under it was another photograph. This one showed Emily standing beside a younger Adrian. Between them was a little girl. Me. I knew it before I even looked closely. The same pale blue sweater. The same light brown hair. The same small silver bracelet I remembered wearing in an old photograph from my childhood. My breath caught. That is me. Adrian did not respond. His eyes remained fixed on the picture. You knew me, I whispered. I did not know you. He took the photograph from my hand and turned it over. There was writing on the back. Claire Bennett. Age 10. My name. My age. A date from 15 years ago. I stepped back. How did Emily know my name? Adrian looked at me. That is what I have been trying to understand. I felt the room closing around me. My parents never mentioned her. Maybe they did not know who she was. Then why was I here? Adrian's expression tightened. I do not know. He looked at the photograph again. But Emily clearly wanted you to remember. I turned toward the blue room upstairs. There has to be something else. Adrian nodded. We returned to the second floor. The 3 knocks did not come again. The room felt ordinary now, almost disappointingly quiet. I walked toward the wall where I had heard the sound. My fingers traced the faded wallpaper. One section felt different. Slightly raised. I pressed it. Nothing happened. I pressed harder. A narrow panel shifted beneath my hand. My heart jumped. Adrian stepped closer, but I raised my hand. Let me. The panel opened. Behind it was a shallow compartment. Inside sat a small cassette recorder and a single handwritten card. I picked up the card first. 3 words were written across it. Listen before remembering. I looked at Adrian. That sounds like something Emily would say. He nodded. I placed the cassette into the recorder. Static filled the room. Then a woman's voice emerged through the old speaker. Soft. Familiar. If you are hearing this, then the girl came back. My entire body went still. Adrian closed his eyes. Emily continued. And if Adrian is standing beside her, tell him I was never afraid of him. I was afraid of what would happen if he found the truth too soon. The recording paused. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Claire was the only person who saw what happened that night. I looked at Adrian. He looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Because somewhere inside my memory, something had just begun to wake up. The room seemed to stop breathing after Emily's voice faded into static. I stood beside the hidden compartment, staring at the old cassette recorder while the final sentence repeated inside my mind. I was the only person who had seen what happened that night. Claire, Adrian said quietly. I looked at him. His face had lost all color. What do you remember? Nothing. The answer came too quickly. You remember something. I told you, I do not. He stepped closer, but his voice remained calm. Then do not force it. Let the memory come when it is ready. I looked back at the recorder. She knew I would come back. Apparently. Why? Adrian did not answer. Instead, he picked up the cassette and examined the label. There was a date written in faded ink. 15 years ago. The same week Emily disappeared. I reached for the recorder again and pressed play. Static returned. Then Emily's voice. If Claire remembers the blue room, she will remember the key. I looked down at my hand. We already found the key. Adrian nodded. But that is not the key she meant. My stomach tightened. There is another one? Maybe. Emily continued speaking. The first key opens the box. The second opens the door. If you have reached this point, do not trust anyone who tells you the house is empty. The recording ended. Silence returned. I looked at Adrian. You told me the house was not supposed to be sold. Yes. Who sold it? He paused. A company called Bellwether Holdings. The name sounded familiar. I searched my memory. That was the company on the paperwork. Exactly. Who owns it? Adrian looked toward the window. That is what I am going to find out. I folded my arms. You mean we are going to find out? His eyes returned to mine. For the first time, there was the faintest trace of amusement in his expression. You are stubborn. You broke into my house. I walked through an unlocked door. That does not make it better. A quiet silence settled between us. It was strange. Only an hour earlier, I had been ready to ask him to leave. Now I was standing beside him, trying to understand a mystery that somehow included my childhood. Adrian looked toward the stairs. We should check the blue room again. We went back upstairs. The late afternoon light had faded, leaving the room washed in soft gray. I stood near the hidden compartment and studied the wall. The memory returned in fragments. Emily kneeling beside me. Her hand around mine. Rain on the glass. A whisper. Do not tell him. I closed my eyes. Claire? Adrian's voice was distant. I could see Emily's face. She looked younger than I remembered. Worried, but determined. She placed something in my hand. A key. Not brass. Silver. Small. Cold. I remember, I whispered. My eyes opened. What? The second key. Adrian moved closer. Where is it? I touched my wrist without thinking. I do not know. Then another memory surfaced. Emily leading me toward the bookshelf. She pulled out a blue book. Behind it was a narrow space. I walked to the shelf and began removing the books one by one. Adrian watched silently. The fourth book was heavier than the others. I pulled it free. Something metallic dropped behind the shelf. I reached down and picked it up. A small silver key rested in my palm. Adrian stared at it. That is the one. I turned it over. There was a tiny symbol engraved on the handle. The same circle and two lines from the metal box. What does it open? I asked. Adrian looked toward the far end of the room. There was a door I had not noticed before. It was almost completely hidden behind the wallpaper. That, he said. My heart began to pound as I approached it. I lifted the key toward the lock. Before I could turn it, Adrian spoke behind me. Claire, whatever is inside that room may explain why Emily disappeared. I looked at the door. Then I turned the key. The key turned with a soft click. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then something inside the wall shifted. A narrow line appeared across the painted surface, almost invisible beneath years of wallpaper. I pressed my palm against it, and the hidden door opened inward with a slow creak. Cold air touched my face. I stopped breathing. Adrian stood beside me, his attention fixed on the darkness beyond the doorway. Stay behind me, he said. I can handle myself. I know. His voice softened. That is not why I said it. I looked at him. There was something different in his expression now. Less control. More concern. I stepped through first. The room beyond was smaller than I expected. Maybe 12 feet by 10. There were no windows. No furniture except a wooden desk, an old chair, and several boxes stacked neatly against the far wall. A single lamp hung from the ceiling, covered in dust. Adrian reached for the switch. Nothing happened. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The beam moved slowly across the room. Files. Photographs. Handwritten notes. Everything had been arranged with careful precision. Someone had expected this room to be found. Emily kept records, Adrian whispered. Apparently. I walked toward the desk. A notebook rested in the center, closed and tied with a faded blue ribbon. My fingers hovered above it. Do you want me to open it? I asked. Adrian looked at me. You found it. You decide. I untied the ribbon. The first pages were filled with names, dates, and short notes. Most meant nothing to me. Then I saw one name I recognized. Adrian Cole. Beside it was a date from 15 years ago. Underneath were 3 words. He does not know. I looked at Adrian. What does that mean? He took the notebook from me and read the page twice. I do not know. You really never knew any of this? No, he turned another page. More names. More dates. Then a photograph slipped from between the pages and landed on the floor. I picked it up. It showed Emily standing outside the house. Beside her was a man I did not recognize. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, wearing a gray suit. On the back of the photograph was another note. He is the reason I cannot come home. Adrian stared at the picture. That man is Charles Bell. Who is Charles Bell? I asked. Adrian's jaw tightened. The founder of Bellwether Holdings. My stomach dropped. The company that sold me the house. He nodded. The same company. I looked around the room. Suddenly every detail felt connected. The house. Emily. Bellwether Holdings. My childhood. The hidden rooms. None of it was random. I turned another page. A sentence had been underlined several times. If something happens to me, the girl must never be allowed to remember the night at the house. I stopped. The girl. Adrian looked at me. You. I felt a chill move through my arms. Why would Emily care so much about what I remembered? Because you saw something. What? He shook his head. We do not know yet. I stared at the notebook. Then I noticed a folded document tucked into the back cover. I pulled it free. It was an old property agreement. The original owner of the house was listed as Emily Cole. But beneath her name was another signature. Charles Bell. My eyes moved to the date. 15 years ago. The same month Emily disappeared. Adrian. He took the document from me. His expression changed as he read the final line. This cannot be right. What? He pointed to the bottom of the page. There was a witness signature. My breath caught. The name belonged to someone I knew. Someone who had been part of my life since childhood. My mother. I stared at the signature until the letters blurred. Adrian looked at me. Claire, your family knew Emily. I shook my head. No. My parents never mentioned her. Adrian's eyes stayed on the document. Then someone made sure you forgot. My mother's signature was supposed to be impossible. I had spent my entire life believing she had never known anything about Emily Cole, yet there it was on a document hidden inside a room that had been sealed for 15 years. I stared at the faded ink until my eyes hurt. That is not possible, I whispered. Adrian stood beside me, silent. Claire, look at the date. I did. September 14th. 15 years ago. 3 days before Emily disappeared. My mother was in the hospital that week, I said. She had surgery. Are you certain? Of course I am. I remembered that week. At least, I thought I did. My father had slept in a chair beside her bed. I had been 10 years old, spending afternoons with my aunt because children were not allowed to stay overnight. That was the memory I had always carried. But now another image surfaced. A blue hallway. Rain on glass. Emily's hand around mine. I pressed my fingers against my temple. Something is wrong with my memory. Adrian looked at me carefully. You were 10. Memories from childhood can change. Not like this. I looked at the signature again. Someone knew Emily. Someone in my family. Adrian picked up the property agreement and examined it under the light from my phone. There is another problem. He pointed to the bottom corner. A second date had been written in pencil. September 17th. The day Emily vanished. Why would a property agreement be changed 3 days later? I asked. Maybe it was never a normal property agreement. He turned the page over. Nothing. Then he noticed a faint indentation beneath the signature. There may be another page. We searched the desk. Nothing. Adrian opened the notebook and ran his fingers along the binding. Emily was careful. He pressed the spine. A hidden compartment opened beneath the back cover. Inside was a folded letter. My name was written across the front. Claire. My hands went cold. She wrote this for you, Adrian said. I unfolded the paper. The first line made my breath catch. Claire, if you are reading this, your parents kept their promise. I stopped. What promise? Adrian shook his head. Keep reading. I continued. They promised me they would protect you from what you saw. I asked them to make sure you never remembered the house, because the truth would put you in danger. My heart began pounding. What did I see? The next line was shorter. You saw Charles Bell speaking to your father. I looked at Adrian. My father? He nodded slowly. Keep going. The letter continued. They were arguing about the documents. Your father wanted them returned. Charles wanted them hidden. You were standing in the hallway when they realized you had heard them. I stopped reading. A memory appeared so suddenly that I nearly dropped the letter. My father kneeling in front of me. His hands resting on my shoulders. His voice low and gentle. Claire, whatever you heard tonight, forget it. Then Emily appeared behind him. She was holding the silver key. She looked directly at me. You can trust me. I opened my eyes. Adrian was watching me. I remember, I whispered. Your father was here. Yes. And Emily knew me. Yes. I looked at the letter again. There was one final sentence. If Charles ever returns to the house, do not let him find the second key. I looked down at the silver key in my hand. We already found it. Adrian's expression changed. Then we need to leave. Why? He looked toward the window. A car had stopped across the street. Its headlights were off. Because that car has been there for 20 minutes. I stared at it. How do you know? Adrian reached for the letter. His voice was almost a whisper. Because I recognized the driver. Claire, do not look at the car. Adrian's voice was barely above a whisper. Of course, that was the first thing I wanted to do. I looked anyway. The sedan remained across the street beneath the rain-darkened trees, its windows almost black against the pale afternoon. I could not see the driver. You said you recognize him. I do. Adrian folded Emily's letter and slipped it inside his coat. Then who is he? He watched the car for another second. Daniel Mercer. The name meant nothing to me. Adrian continued, he worked for Bellwether Holdings 15 years ago. I looked at the photograph of Charles Bell on the desk. And now? Now he works for someone else. Who? Adrian's eyes met mine. That is what concerns me. He walked toward the window, but stopped before the curtain. We should leave through the back. I picked up the silver key and closed my fingers around it. Where are we going? Somewhere private. You have a private place? A faint smile appeared on his face. A few. Despite everything, I almost smiled too. Then the sound of a car door closing came from outside. Adrian's expression changed instantly. Now. We moved downstairs. The house seemed different as we crossed the hallway, every shadow suddenly carrying meaning. I followed Adrian through the kitchen and out the back door. Cold rain touched my face. The backyard was narrow, bordered by an old wooden fence and a row of tall hedges. Adrian led me toward a small gate at the far end. Stay close. We reached the alley behind the house. No one was there. For a moment, I thought we were safe. Then I noticed something on the ground near the gate. A folded piece of paper. My name was written across it. Claire. I stopped. Adrian noticed. Do not touch it. It has my name. Exactly. He picked it up carefully by the edge and unfolded it. There were only 4 words inside. You remember more than you think. I felt the air leave my lungs. How did they know? Adrian looked back toward the house. Because someone has been watching you. For how long? He did not answer. We walked several blocks before reaching a dark blue sedan parked near a quiet corner. Adrian opened the passenger door. Get in. I hesitated. How do I know I can trust you? He looked at me for a long moment. You do not. That answer surprised me. Then why should I come with you? Because you have already seen enough to become part of this, whether you wanted to or not. I got into the car. Adrian walked around to the driver's side. As we pulled away, I looked back at the townhouse. The upstairs window of the blue room was still visible through the rain. For 1 second, I thought I saw a figure standing behind the glass. I blinked. The window was empty. Did you see that? I asked. Adrian glanced in the mirror. See what? Someone was upstairs. He slowed slightly. Are you sure? I think so. He looked toward the house again, but we were already turning the corner. Claire, he said, there is something you need to understand. What? The people connected to Emily did not spend 15 years protecting that secret just to let you uncover it now. I looked down at the silver key in my palm. Then why did they let me find the house? Adrian was silent. The question seemed to follow us through the rain. Finally, he said, maybe they did not. I turned toward him. What do you mean? He tightened his hands around the steering wheel. Maybe someone wanted you to find it. My heart sank. Why? Adrian looked at me. Because you are the only person who can open what Emily left behind. The word stayed with me long after we left the townhouse. You are the only person who can open what Emily left behind. I watched the rain slide across the passenger window while Adrian drove through quiet streets, neither of us speaking for several minutes. Where are we going? I finally asked. My office. Your office? It is private. I almost laughed. You keep saying that as if private automatically means safe. He glanced at me. It does not. The honesty in his voice made me look away. We crossed into downtown, where the streets grew brighter and the buildings taller. Adrian turned into an underground parking garage beneath a modern glass building. The place was nearly empty. He parked near a private elevator and waited until I stepped out before joining me. No one knows you are here, he said. Except whoever has been following me. That is why we need answers quickly. The elevator opened onto a quiet floor with dark wood walls and wide windows overlooking the city. I expected something intimidating. Instead, it looked like a law office. Clean. Organized. Almost ordinary. Adrian walked to a desk and placed Emily's letter beside a stack of folders. Bellwether Holdings has changed ownership several times since Emily disappeared, he said. But the original records were never completely transferred. Meaning? Some files stayed hidden. He opened a cabinet and removed a thin folder. This is everything I could find connected to Emily. I sat across from him. Inside were photographs, property records, handwritten notes, and several newspaper clippings. One photograph caught my attention immediately. It showed Emily standing beside my father. I stared at it. My father knew her. Yes. How close were they? Adrian paused. I do not know. I looked through the papers again. Then I found something unexpected. A receipt from a small diner. The date was 15 years ago. September 17th. The day Emily disappeared. 2 names were printed on it. Emily Cole. Thomas Bennett. My father's name. They met that night, I whispered. Adrian nodded. Apparently. Then why did my father tell me he was at the hospital? Adrian leaned back. Maybe he was. That does not make sense. No. It does not. I turned another page. There was a handwritten note attached to the receipt. Meeting moved to the house. Bring the documents. My fingers went cold. What documents? Adrian looked through the folder. That is what we need to find. I remembered Emily's letter. She had mentioned documents. Charles Bell wanted them hidden. My father wanted them returned. Suddenly the mystery felt much larger than one missing woman. What were the documents about? I asked. Adrian looked at me. Property transfers. That is all? Not exactly. He opened another file. Several properties were transferred through Bellwether Holdings using names that did not belong to the actual owners. I frowned. Why would anyone do that? To hide who really controlled them. I looked down at the papers. And Emily found out. Yes. He pushed a photograph toward me. It showed a row of houses, including mine. Your house was one of them. My heart sank. So Emily was not hiding in that house. No, Adrian's voice became quiet. She was protecting something inside it. I looked at the silver key resting beside the files. And someone still wants it. He nodded. That is why they followed you. I looked toward the city lights. Then why did Emily choose me? Adrian was silent. I turned back to him. Why did she trust a 10-year-old girl? He looked at the photograph of me and Emily. Maybe because you were the only person she knew who had nothing to do with their world. I studied his face. For the first time, I saw something beyond the mystery. Regret. Deep and quiet. You blamed yourself, I said. Adrian looked away. For 15 years. Before I could answer, his phone rang. He listened without speaking. Then his expression changed. What happened? I asked. He ended the call. The archive room at the townhouse was opened. My heart stopped. By who? Adrian looked directly at me. Someone who knew exactly where to look. The archive room had been opened. Those words followed me as Adrian and I stood beneath the quiet lights of his office. How long ago? I asked. 20 minutes. And the house? Empty. I looked at the folder on his desk. Then whoever went there knew we were here. Adrian closed the file. That is what I am afraid of. He reached for his coat. We are going back. You just told me someone was watching me. I know. And now you want me to return to the house? He looked at me. I want you where I can protect you. The words were simple, but they stayed with me. We drove back through the rain. I watched the city disappear behind us until the familiar streets returned. When we reached the townhouse, the front door was closed. Nothing looked different from the outside. That somehow made everything worse. Adrian entered first. I followed. The house was silent. The blue room upstairs was exactly as we had left it, except for one thing. The hidden doorway stood open. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. They found the room. Adrian nodded. Yes. We went upstairs. The boxes had been moved. The notebook was gone. The old photographs were still there, but Emily's letter had disappeared. So had the property agreement with my mother's signature. They took the documents that mattered, I said. Adrian studied the empty space on the desk. They knew exactly what they wanted. I walked toward the wall. Maybe they left something behind. Claire. I ignored him. The memory from the blue room was still inside me. Emily had hidden the second key. She had told me to remember. Maybe she had left another clue. I ran my fingers along the edge of the bookshelf. Nothing. Then I noticed a small indentation beneath the lowest shelf. I pressed it. A narrow drawer opened. Inside was a single envelope. My name was written across it. Adrian came closer. Do not open it alone. I looked at him. You are staying. Yes. I pulled out the envelope. Inside was a photocopy of an old newspaper article. The headline described a property dispute involving Bellwether Holdings and several private homeowners. Beneath it was a handwritten sentence. The documents were never about the houses. I read it twice. Then what were they about? Adrian took the page. His eyes moved across the article. The owners. What does that mean? He pointed to a list of names printed at the bottom. Look. I recognized one immediately. Thomas Bennett. My father. Another name followed. Emily Cole. Then Charles Bell. But there was a fourth name. I stared at it. Who is Margaret Reed? Adrian went still. That name should not be here. Why? Because Margaret Reed was the woman who raised Emily after her parents died. I looked at him. You knew her? I met her once. And she knew my father? Adrian shook his head. I do not know. I looked at the list again. 4 names. 4 people connected to a secret hidden inside my childhood home. Then I noticed a handwritten number beneath Margaret's name. 217. My heart skipped. That number. Adrian looked at it. What? The clock upstairs. We rushed back to the hallway. The old clock was still hanging on the wall. Its hands had stopped at exactly 2:17. Adrian removed it carefully. Behind it was a small compartment. Inside was a second cassette. I reached for it. A label had been placed across the front. For Claire. My hands trembled. Adrian looked at me. Whatever is on that recording may answer everything. I placed the cassette into the recorder. Static filled the room. Then my father's voice came through. I closed my eyes. Emily, you have to understand. Claire cannot know what happened. Emily answered softly, then tell me the truth, Thomas. Who does she belong to? The recording stopped. I opened my eyes. Adrian was staring at me. What did she mean? I whispered. Before he could answer, the recorder clicked again. Emily's voice returned. She is not your daughter. She is not your daughter. I heard the words again in my head, even after the recording stopped. The room felt impossibly quiet. I looked at Adrian. He was staring at the cassette recorder as if the answer might somehow appear from the silence. What does that mean? I asked. He did not answer. Adrian. He finally looked at me. It means your father knew something about your past that you were never told. That is not enough. My voice shook. I need the truth. He nodded slowly. Then we keep listening. He pressed play. Static filled the room. My father's voice returned. Emily, Claire is safe with us. That is all that matters. Emily answered, You know that is not what I am asking. There was a pause. Then my father said, Her mother wanted her protected. My breath caught. Her mother? I whispered. Adrian looked at me but said nothing. The recording continued. Charles knows she exists. If he finds out where she is, everything changes. Emily's voice became softer. Then you cannot keep pretending she is your daughter. My father's reply came after a long silence. She is my daughter in every way that matters. I closed my eyes. A memory surfaced. My father carrying me through the rain. My mother standing beside the front door. Emily watching from the hallway. I had always believed that night was ordinary. It was not. Who was my mother? I asked. Adrian looked at the old photograph of Emily. I do not know. But Emily knew. Yes. The recording continued. Emily said, She deserves to know her real name. My father's voice sounded tired. Not yet. Thomas, she is 10 years old. How long do you think you can keep this from her? The recording ended again. I stared at the machine. There has to be more. Adrian searched the cassette. Maybe this was not the only recording. He opened the old clock compartment again. Nothing. Then I remembered the number. 217. The number was not just the clock. Adrian looked at me. What do you mean? Emily used it as a marker. She left it beside Margaret Reed's name. I walked to the desk and opened the notebook. The page with the 4 names was still there. Under Margaret's name, the number had been written twice. 217. I turned the page. Nothing. Then another page. Still nothing. Adrian watched me. Try the property records. I placed the old property agreement on the desk. The address ended in number 217. My heart skipped. That is the house. Adrian nodded. Exactly. I looked at the document again. Beneath the address was a handwritten note I had not noticed before. Room 217. I looked at Adrian. There is no room 217. Not anymore. He moved toward the wall beside the staircase. Old properties sometimes had service rooms that were removed during renovations. Could there be another room here? There could. We searched the hallway. Behind a framed landscape painting, Adrian found another section of faded wallpaper. He touched it gently. This wall is different. My pulse quickened. We moved the painting aside. A narrow wooden panel appeared beneath it. There was no handle. Only a small circular mark. The same symbol. I took the silver key from my pocket. It fit the mark perfectly. I turned it. The panel opened. Behind it was a shallow space containing a leather folder. I pulled it out. Inside was a birth certificate. My name was printed across the top. Claire Bennett. My hands trembled as I read the next line. Mother, Margaret Reed. Father, unknown. I could not breathe. Adrian reached for the document, but I held it against my chest. Margaret Reed was Emily's guardian, I whispered. And apparently, she was my mother. Adrian looked at me with something close to disbelief. Then I saw one final document beneath the certificate. It was a photograph. Emily stood beside Margaret, holding a baby. The baby was me. On the back, Emily had written one sentence. Claire was never the secret. She was the reason for it. The birth certificate stayed in my hands, but everything I thought I knew about my life had already begun to disappear. Margaret Reed. My mother. Unknown father. I read the names again and again, waiting for the letters to rearrange themselves into something familiar. They did not. Adrian stood quietly beside me. Claire, he said, you do not have to process all of this tonight. Yes, I do. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Because someone spent 27 years deciding what I was allowed to know. I looked at the photograph of Emily holding me as a baby. And I want to know why. Adrian nodded. Then we find Margaret. I looked at him. She is dead. How do you know? My father told me she died when I was young. Adrian's expression changed. Your father told you that? Yes. Then we need to question everything he ever told you. The words hurt because I knew he was right. I turned the photograph over again. Emily had written that I was the reason for the secret. I looked at Adrian. Why would Charles Bell care about me? He studied the documents. Maybe he did not care about you. Maybe he cared about what your mother knew. What did she know? That is what we need to discover. A soft sound came from downstairs. We both stopped. The house was quiet again. Adrian walked toward the hallway, then paused. Stay here. No, he looked back at me. Claire. I am done waiting in rooms while other people decide what I can handle. Something shifted in his expression. Then he nodded. All right. We went downstairs together. The front door was still locked. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then I noticed the small table near the entrance. A white envelope rested on top. No name. No address. Just a single blue mark drawn across the front. The same symbol from the hidden rooms. Adrian picked it up and opened it. Inside was a photograph of Margaret Reed. She was standing outside a small house in Pennsylvania. On the back was an address. Beneath it, someone had written, "She has been waiting." I stared at the words. She is alive. Adrian nodded. Apparently. We left the townhouse before midnight. The rain had stopped, and the streets reflected the soft glow of the city lights. During the drive, I looked out the window and tried to remember Margaret's face. I could not. But I remembered something else. A lullaby. A woman's voice. A silver key pressed into my tiny hand. Then Emily saying, "One day, she will tell you everything." I turned toward Adrian. Emily knew this day would come. Yes. And you were supposed to find me. He was silent. Were you? I asked. He finally answered. I spent 15 years looking for my sister. I never knew she had left me another person to find. I looked down at the silver key. Maybe she did not leave me for you to find. Adrian glanced at me. What do you mean? I held the key tightly. Maybe she left me so I could find myself. He did not respond. But his expression softened. We drove through the night toward Pennsylvania. Somewhere ahead was the woman who knew where I came from. Somewhere behind us was a house filled with secrets that had finally begun to speak. And somewhere between those two places was the truth about Emily Cole. As the first pale light of morning appeared beyond the highway, Adrian reached for the radio. A voice interrupted the music before he could change the station. Claire Bennett, if you are traveling with Adrian Cole, turn around. I stared at the radio. The voice continued, calm and unmistakably familiar. Margaret is not waiting for you. She is waiting for him. Then the transmission ended. Adrian looked at me. I looked at him. For the first time, neither of us knew what to say. And somewhere ahead, the woman who had known my real name for 27 years was waiting for us to arrive.